'Tis the season for those irresistible ginger thins, cozy blankets for cuddling by the fire, and making home warm and welcoming. For one-stop holiday shopping, visit your local IKEA or ikea-usa.com/holiday.
The Traveler's Inn. Written by Travis I. Sivart. Narrated by Travis I. Sivart. Episode 1. Taproom Dancing. Cogsley flinched, as much as an automaton could, when the mug shattered on the beam of wood a meter away. Teeny cubes of glass scattered and tinkled on the bar, and the light of the LED lanterns cascaded rainbows across the bartender's bow tie and spotless tuxedo. The three-piece band, a fiddle, a flute, and a banjo, picked up the tempo of the tune and raised the pitch of the music to match the pitch of the brawl. Gollum Floor Cleaner, the second automaton, shuffled towards the shards of drinkware, grumbling, the broom and dustpan scraping along the wooden planks of the floor. Cogsley, the Golem's voice was slow and melancholy. Why do they do these things to make extra work for us? Because, Cogsley's voice was nasal and echoed through the glass dome that formed his head, they are living beings who have no sense of decorum. The same reason they track mud across my clean floor, spit everywhere, and use the privy. They think living means making messes. Cogsley's glow dome lit up and he crouched to avoid another shattering glass. The bartender was mixing an absolutely toxic and horrid drink. The hangman's blood. A drink of stout or porter blended with rum, gin, whiskey, brandy, with a splash of champagne to give it a bit of fizz. It was like a Long Island iced tea, but if you added a dash of a horror flick to it. It was attributed to a writer named Richard Hughes, who had probably died from alcohol poisoning on the Earth realm sometime in the 1930s. Jerome the gnome apparated on the bar, his hands weaving while he chanted. The misty blue glow of an ethereal dragon, as long as Jerome was tall, appeared in front of him and darted forth. The magical worm opened its maw to engulf the fur-clad barbarian, shouting a battle cry of Adrian! While swinging a bar stool at the gnome's half-ogre companion. The ancient predator's jaws went wide and snapped closed around the barbarian's outstretched fingers. Well, two of his fingers. Its meter-long body coiling around the warrior's thick forearm. The mighty, but teeny, beast squirmed and struggled, squeaking and growling, trying to take down the foe a dozen times larger than itself. Durg raised his arm, and the furnishing broke into splinters as it met an immovable force. The half-ogre smiled, showing 14 thick, wide-spaced teeth gleaming yellow in the ember light. The crooked grin hinted at untold tales of meat and bruise. The blue-glowing reptilian illusion gnawed viciously at the northern warrior as the man took a meaty ham-fist to the face from Jerome's oversized companion. The barbarian flew backwards, crashing into a table. Elementius, the scholar and professor of Tidal Tower's University of Magics, lifted his glass as his table crashed to the floor under the barbarian's weight. You see, Tilbert, the elder continued his diatribe, stroking his short gray beard with his free hand, the tribal tactics of domination of the frostbitten barbarians is well known. Direct confrontation and joy of battle. That's the essence of how they find meaning in life. They also dote on lineage and ancestors and will go on for hours about how their father did this and their grandfather did that. The thin youth beside the older man kept clacking away on the 15 keys of the brass contraption that hovered in front of him. Tilbert, who probably had some Aphene blood in the mix, sniffled and pushed his glasses up from the tip of his pinched nose to the bridge. A notebook bobbed in the air to his left, and a puffy, feathered quill skittered across the page. The pen kept scribbling notes about everything happening around Tilbert, while the acolyte attempted to capture every drop of wisdom his mentor pontificated. After all, that is why the old man paid him. Cogsley sighed and slid the hangman's blood down the bar. The glass moved at an even pace, whirling and spinning to avoid bowls of nuts and pretzels. The vessel jigged to one side, swerving to dodge around glasses of various shapes and sizes, some which popped and crackled, while others hissed and bubbled. A gnarled hand stopped it, then grasped the mug's handle. Spinning on the bar stool to face the room, Croker Norge, in his stained duster and fedora, raised the glass in toast to the ruckus. He took a long pull from the mug, cringing and shuddering at the taste. "You gotta be kidding me!" The dusky-skinned woman beside the codger muttered and glared around the room. "I should put a needle into every one of these people, so I can have a few moments of peaceable drinking. How's a lady supposed to get soused with all these animals howling and beating the chests?" "Oh, kiddin'." Croker's voice was like gravel being spread on plywood. "Boys will be boys." "To hell with that crap," the woman growled. "There's no excuse for this behavior. Why'd this fight even start?" "The kiddin' has teeth and claws." Croker chuckled. "That's right, and don't you forget it." Kiddin raised her wrist, and short puffs of compressed air were followed by two of the bar brawl participants falling to the floor with shrill screams. It was a busy night in the Travelers' Inn, and it was fight night because Jack Tucker was nowhere to be seen, and that always made the regulars feel a bit frisky. The risk of repercussion was low when the proprietor was away. Two observers lingered in a back corner of the establishment, whispering between themselves and pointing at combatants. Wanderley stood on a table, his hand on Nomed's shoulder, and shouted encouragement at various fighters. The halfling flicked coins into the fray, the golden currency propelled by his snapping fingers as the money rested on his thumb, his elbow jutting forward to help with his aim. "Just a tip!" Wanderley yelled when a patron turned to glare at him after being hit in the head with a coin. Nomed, a demon half-breed, watched the chaos with a bemused grin, leaning on his hand and a half-broadsword. People avoided involving the swordsman and mage in any fight in the inn, but often sought him out for tasks or information. The two were an unlikely pair, and in the past had been competitors more often than allies. But in the Travelers' Inn, they were often seen together, and that usually meant trouble. The truth of the matter was that the two had engineered the current bar brawl, all for a bet. The Travelers' Inn was a place where people from all over came to gather, and by all over, it really was from all over. Different worlds, times, realities, and even dimensions. The pub and hotel was an interdimensional nexus that had a dozen doors in and out that could open to an unexplored number of places. Professor Elementius had tasked himself with cataloging and categorizing all the realms the doors had access to, but he rarely left his seat and tankard to do that task. Well, except a sojourn to the lavatory for his constitutionals. Membership was required to enter, and it wasn't easy to get a membership. It wasn't because the inn had particularly high standards, as was shown by the current crowd and its choice of entertainment, but rather because the establishment was a bit hard to find. The exterior of the building always blended to match the environment it appeared in, and by appeared in, it was meant that the inn was a traveling sort of building, and it wandered from place to place. It never looked out of place whenever it appeared in a world, whether on the side of a road, in the center of a city, or at an oasis in a desert. It always looked like it belonged there. People never wondered where it had come from. They always just assumed it had always been there, because it looked like it belonged. It was part of the charm of the place. The building had figured out long ago that if you looked like you belonged where you were, very few people questioned why you were there. Membership wasn't as much of an application process, but more of the inn choosing you to be allowed to enter it. Some folks came in once and never saw it again when they left. Others became regulars and traveled with the inn as it moved around the multiverse in various incarnations of creation. The interior of the building followed a common version of physics, which included magic. The inn could visit places with other natural laws, but it catered to a specific type of crowd, and that sort of crowd expected gravity to cause things to fall downward, light to allow people to see in its spectrum, and drinks to be watered down when cheap and smooth when expensive. The current setup of the common room was, well, common. It had an extensive bar along one side, complete with a mirror behind it and bottles on shelves in front of the mirror. Taps were set in the polished wooden surface of the bar, and various mugs, steins, tankards, and stemware hung from racks above. Smaller cups and glasses were stored on shelves beside the collection of bottles behind the bar, or underneath the bar itself. Cogsley was the de facto bartender, bouncer, and cleaning crew, assisted by the large, lumbering, clay Gollum floor cleaner. Various imps, drones, and barmaids delivered food, drinks, and other requested items to the 24 or so tables and booths throughout the main room. There was a back room with a couple pool tables, a half-dozen dartboards, and a single foosball table. Pushed to one corner was a lone air hockey table that glitched, so the pucks picked up speed and ignored gravity. Another open doorway led to the kitchen, pantry, and back office. A stairway between it and a hallway leading to the privy led up to the rooms for rent. The band was on a small, raised stage in front of the stairs. The establishment as a whole had the homey, dark wood floors, beams, rafters, tables, chairs, and benches. 8 doors stood at the cardinal points and their sub-points in each corner. Windows on the walls on each side of the door showed various places that didn't match the other scenes outside the other windows. A snowy landscape, a workstone cavern, a mountain sunset, a stormy ocean dancing with lightning, a star-strewn backdrop dominated by a swirling purple planet, and a medieval city were just some of the things that could be seen outside of the inn. The interesting oddity of the doors was that not everyone could see all the different doors, windows, or things beyond them. The staff could, and most of the regulars could, but quite often people who were just visiting for a one-off could only see the door that applied to them. It was a quirk of reality dictating someone's perception, or maybe that person's perception that created their reality. Professor Elementius had talked about that at length, and was often heard questioning if there were even more doors, or portals as he preferred to label them, that he couldn't see. The front door burst open. A figure silhouetted in a deep electric blue light stood within the frame. The band stopped playing, except for the flute player, who was in mid-trill. The note wavered for a few more seconds before dying out. The brawl slowed and ground to a halt, combatants hesitating with bottles or other various weapons poised over their chosen rivals. "Good evening, sir." Cogsley drew out the words. "Hey, Cogsley." Jack Tucker stepped into the room, the door closing by itself behind him. The proprietor looked around the room. "What's going on here?" "Bar fight, sir." Cogsley stated the obvious. "Well, stop it. We need to clean up. We're about to have guests." Jack bent and picked up a chair, setting it upright. Standing up, Jack looked at the patrons of his establishment. The gathering was all staring at the man. Jack was not much to look at. He didn't stand out in a crowd, or even in most people's minds. He was utterly unremarkable. He had eyes the color of eyes and hair-colored hair. He was neither tall nor short, but somewhere in between, and appeared to be somewhere between his late 20s and mid-50s, depending on the lighting. He tended to wear nondescript beige trousers, a mildly wrinkled white button-up shirt, and an earth-toned, wide-brimmed hat that had seen plenty of weather. Jack sighed. "Come on, people," he clapped his hands. "Let's get to it. Set this place to rights and watch the message board. I expect to hear the chime any time now, and you all know what that means." "Dinner time, sir?" Cogsley asked. "Time to make the doughnuts," Gollum chimed in. "Time to get down and get funky," Wanderly giggled. "Actually," Elementius stood up, holding his tankard, "the chime means that a new job has posted, and a reward will be associated with it. It is also usually accompanied by someone new entering the Traveller's Inn for the first time, and that you cretins and ruffians should be on your best behavior." "It means I need another drink," Croker muttered and raised his mug towards Cogsley. "Barkeep, bourbon, and make it snappy." "Okay," Jack rolled his eyes and sighed. "This place is set to rights in the next 10 minutes, or else everyone needs to pay their back bar tabs in 11 minutes. Pulling a pocket watch on a chain from his pants, the proprietor checked the time. A stampede of sound rose while Jack looked down at the timepiece, and a dozen people began setting tables and chairs upright, picking up fallen crockery and drinking vessels, and cleaning up in general. Gollum began a slow circuit of the room, weaving between people and furniture, pushing their wide broom and gathering broken crockery and dropped food. Imps launched themselves from their high perches, burlap bags of sawdust on their backs, performing dusting runs as they flew low to the floorboards. As Gollum cleared the mess, guiding it to the wall with the hinged floorboard, where they'd push it all into the floor chute that led to the basement and the monster below who fed on such things, the imps layered the floor with the soft, absorbent, and slightly sweet-smelling sawdust. Porters and barmaids cleared dirty tables onto trays and into wooden crates. Afterwards, another would come behind and set fresh silverware, napkins, and sugar and salt bowls in the center of each. "Who broke the table?" Jack bemoaned, holding his hands towards the shattered remnants around Professor Elementius and Tilbert's feet. "That was I, sirrah." The blonde-haired barbarian stepped forward, a glowing blue dragon still wrapped around his forearm and gnawing on the silver ring on his finger with enthusiasm. "And you are—" Jack sighed. The man rose to his full height in front of the inn's proprietor, jutting his chin into the air, balled up his fist and thumped it to his chest. The small magical reptile curled around his arm squeaked, squirming to get out from between it and the man's bare chest. Jack had to look up to see the man's face, doing so out of politeness, and so he didn't just stare awkwardly at the turgid nipples on the man's sun-bronzed chest. "I am Gunther," the barbarian intoned, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "Son of Wat the Strong, son of Gurgi the Beleaguered, son of Pock the Cruncher, son of Koshi the Bold. My father, Wat the Strong, fought in the Battle of Stones, overcame hordes of trolls in the Rock War, braved the perilous volcano Truck the Fiery, faced down the rampage of the Kobold Uprising of Wet Hill a score of years ago." "Okay, Gunther, got it. Great," Jack interrupted, holding up his hands to stop the flow of history from knocking him over. The professor cleared his voice, and all eyes turned to him. He raised his newly refilled tankard of ale and took a deep draught. Lowering the drinking vessel, he smacked his lips and blew the foam from his mustache with a puff of breath. "The Kobold Uprising of Wet Hill?" he began orating, was actually just a poor, clever beast trying to get away from their enslavement by the wizard, Blandish, not some great triumph. I expect your father didn't win a great battle, but instead was pursuing creatures who just wanted to get away to freedom. Truck the Fiery sunk into the ocean, so I suspect your father was probably just on a fishing skiff watching it do so. As for the hordes of trolls in the Rock War— "What?" Gunther bellowed. "Who is this man who thinks he can know so much about my heritage, clan, and father?"
"That's Elementius, my dear Wat's son,"
Tilbert said, pulling his shoulders back with the pride apparent in the language of his body and tongue. The conversation was interrupted by a tinkling noise that sounded like a tuning fork trailing across thin glass tubes. The sound continued for 3 breaths, then ended with a dull, tinny bong that sounded like a cheap brass gong being hit with a soggy chicken leg. The scenes outside the windows began moving, like the gods were rolling the backdrop off the celestial stage beyond. The scenery moved quicker, changing to forest and desert, then a blizzard. It continued changing faster and faster, a dizzying array of endless places and landscapes that zipped past the windows faster than the mind could follow. The scenery stopped. One moment it was spinning like a child's top. The next it was still and in place. A small bell sounded from the east door, indicating it had opened, and all heads turned to see who was stepping through.
For 150 years, Children's National Hospital has provided exceptional care and groundbreaking research. Please donate today to give children and healthcare heroes a reason to believe this holiday season. Visit childrensnational.org/holiday.